Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, this is Wayne Callan for Attitude Magazine. Today's webinar, Using Music to Rewire Your ADHD LD Child's Brain, will give us insights and practical strategies to help our children focus, concentrate, and learn at school and at home. The more we know about music's beneficial effect on the developing ADHD brain, the more we can tune into it to help our kids. We are very fortunate to have Sharlene Habermeyer, the author of Good Music, Brighter Children. The research for her book came from the work she did with her learning disabled son, Brandon. Sharlene holds a master's degree from Pepperdine University and currently teaches college. So welcome, Sharlene, and very good to have you here today.
Thank you, Wayne, for your introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here today for this webinar about sound therapy and sound medicine for your using music and music lessons to sharpen your ADHD and ADD and LD child's brain. I spent over the last 30-plus years studying how music affects the brain and how it builds a bigger, better brain. I'm a mother of 5 boys, and my initial inspiration to study the brain benefits of music came about the same time my third son, Brandon, was born. Brandon suffered a very traumatic birth. My doctor was going out of town, and so he induced my labor. Brandon was too high in the birth canal, and the doctor literally dragged him out with forceps. It caused a lot of damage. I'm not going to go into all the details, but by the age of 3, we did have him in speech and language therapy. At the age of 6, when he was about midway through kindergarten, we decided to have him tested. So we had him tested both through the public schools and privately. The results that came back were grim. He had auditory processing, auditory discrimination, visual motor, visual perception. There were sensory integration issues and attention deficit disorder. The difference between his oral and written IQ is approximately 38 points, which indicates severe learning disabilities. And so we were pretty much told that school would be difficult and college more than likely would be out of the question. There was one of the psychologists that told us some very good advice and encouraged us to find out something that he was interested in and good at and help him to develop that. Those of you, and I'm sure most of you, who have an ADD, ADHD child and a learning disabled child, you totally and completely understand the difficulties. When they're in school, they have difficulty staying on task, focusing, listening, understanding, and so forth. We were told that the learning disabled child, that it all learning disabilities start as auditory processing. They can hear fine, but they have difficulty processing what they hear, and as a result, they have problems in all different areas of learning. I had studied quite a bit about how music affects the brain, so I really felt that music was going to be Brandon's catalyst for learning. If you look at the image on the right-hand side, you see all of the different areas that music strengthens in the brain. It's basically the entire brain, the left, the right, the front, the back portions of the brain. But it particularly builds the auditory, the auditory, the visual spatial, and the motor areas of the brain. So here is your brain onto music. Let's talk about the auditory for a minute. The auditory cortex is directly related to speech and language. When a child has a well-developed auditory cortex, they're oftentimes early talkers and early readers. Now, when a child learns to read, as you know, it's ears first, eyes second. They have to be able to hear the sounds of the letters, the vowels, the consonants, the blends, in order to know how to say the words. So auditory cortex is extremely important for reading and learning. The next area is the visual, because they have to be able to visually track with their eyes from word to word as each word comes, and then also from line to line, because you don't want them skipping words or skipping lines. The visual spatial areas of the brain, this helps children with reading comprehension because they are forming pictures in their mind. You don't want them just reading words on their page. When they form the pictures in their mind, it helps them to remember what they read. It also is directly related to higher forms of math and science as they are forming three-dimensional pictures in their mind. The motor cortices of the brain is extremely important because that is brain organization. It is also makes the foundation to help build the visual and auditory system, so you can see that they are all connected. And therefore, the motor cortices becomes the building blocks of the brain. So the question is what happens when a child listens to classical music and what happens when they actually learn a musical instrument? We're going to talk about what happens when they listen to classical music. And the question that always comes up is why classical music? Why does classical music build a bigger, better brain? Why can't my child listen to pop or some other kind of music or jazz? Or why is it classical music? So I'm going to explain this to you architecturally. I want you to pretend that you're standing outside your home or apartment building or condominium, wherever you live. And I want you to look at the shapes that make up your building or home. You're going to see some rectangles, maybe some triangles, some squares, some domes or half domes, a circle. Now, in terms of that mathematical architectural structure, you can compare that to any genre of music except for classical music. Why? Because it's a fairly straightforward and simple architectural structure. However, in order to understand what classical music looks like architecturally, you need to look at the old European Gothic cathedrals. Okay, as you can see, there's a huge difference between our homes and these cathedrals. If you were standing in front of one of these cathedrals and just looking at 1 square foot, you're going to see patterns upon patterns, detail upon detail, intricacy and complexity. All right, so the mathematical structure of these cathedrals best represent what classical music would look like architecturally. In fact, the music of Mozart has been compared to the elemental structure of these buildings. So if you take these buildings, you turn it into music, it would be classical music. You put this on the brain, no wonder it builds left, right, front, back portions of the brain simultaneously. So let's talk about some of the studies. This first study was done at the Eastman School of Music. I would kind of get them to calm down before they hit the pillow. And I would try that. Okay. Now, the other thing is, believe it or not, the music that I told you about that was tested by Lozanoff, even though it is lively, it's very calming. Once your brain hits that mode, the body does become relaxed. Even though the brain remains active and able to focus, the body is relaxed. It also is the mode that right before we go to sleep at night, sometimes you get your very best ideas because your brain has gone into that mode. That's why they tell you keep a piece of paper on your nightstand so you can jot down some of these incredible ideas that come to you. Sometimes that's when people actually solve their problems as well. So the music that I did suggest, it can still be a very, very powerful way for calming them down, even though it seems lively.
Stephanie asked, does a child, as he grows into a teen and an adult, have to do it forever in order to reap the benefits? I mean, that's a broad question. You were talking about the developing brain and how music is optimal for that.
Yes, it's pretty, yes, you do. It's like exercise. It's like going to the gym. You know, it'd be great if we could stop midway through and not go back again or not have to do all this exercise. But yes, you have to continue it throughout your life if you want to get the brain benefits of it. I do believe that it definitely builds a bigger, better brain, and you're going to get residual effects of it the rest of your life. But if you want to continue keeping your brain sharp, keeping it on tact, keeping it focused, keeping it at its highest peak of performance, I still think it's a good idea to listen to classical music every day. I practice in the morning just to keep my brain cells working at least 15 minutes.
Wow.
So, and it's just to get, you know, everything on target for the day. And 15 minutes isn't that long.
Right. Anxiety frequently comes with ADHD, and one parent wants to know if there has been any specific research into the effectiveness of music for treating anxiety, or managing it, I should say, and whether music genres beyond classical have been studied, or is it just classical having the benefit?
Well, in terms of anxiety, yes. When I was talking about that one slide that had all of those different studies up there, and I actually go into them in more detail. One of them did talk about anxiety, and I'm pretty sure the one that was recently studied at the, where was it? At the Vermont Medical
University
School.
of Vermont, yeah.
Yes, I think that one definitely they were talking about anxiety on that one. Yes, anxiety management and emotional control. That was one thing that they did study, and that studying a musical instrument absolutely helped that. Mm-hmm. That is a really interesting study, and that one was done by Dr. James Hudziak, Hudziak. If you Google that name, the study will come up, and you can mm-hmm. read it in more detail. But they specifically said anxiety management. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting watching Brandon, because Brandon had anxiety. I think many adults have anxiety, and if you play the music, if you're playing a musical instrument, there's something, I don't want to use the word magical, but there is something magical when that child is playing a musical instrument, how they calm down. And when they're playing a musical instrument, they don't necessarily have to play classical music. They just playing and learning the musical instrument and whatever music they're learning, it's the whole process. Now, listening is another thing, but when they're learning to play an instrument, it doesn't have to be classical. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if that study talks about learning the musical instrument, and I know that they went into the scales, learning the Hanon scales, how it helps with all of those different things, but I would definitely get them involved in playing a musical instrument.
What if the choice of instrument is the drums, and you live in a small apartment? Do you talk your child, even though he's gravitated toward them, the drums?
If they want to do it, I'd get earplugs for the parents. And, okay, you can get the whole drum set, but they also have, what did we get for one of our kids? It was just the drum pad, I think it's called. And mm-hmm. that's how he practiced, was on the drum pad, so he didn't go all completely insane. Uh-huh. But I think it's great because, all right, when they get into middle school and high school, it's a really popular thing, the kid who plays the drums. Mm-hmm. So by all means, if they want to, now it's different from reading music. What they're doing is they're reading rhythms. Mm-hmm. So I would still, if they're playing the drums, I'd say great, fine, wonderful, but I want you to learn also how to read music. Mm-hmm. So I would probably have them learning the piano as well. Uh-huh. But, learning the drums, they're great. They're fun. My one son who played the drums, he ended up in drumline and had a great time with it. It was a really great high school experience as a result of that. Mm-hmm. So, yes, by all means, do it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for all of your insights and takeaways. Really, it was an eye-opener for me.
Well, thank you.
And I think probably the rest of the participants.
Well,
that ends today's webinar, and we'll see you next week. Have a good day.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.